All right, it looks like we've made it to the top of the hour. I'm going to go ahead and get started. And as other people join in, just as a reminder, this will be recorded and available to you later. So to get started, my name is Robin Kamucheka. I'm a technical application specialist with Denovo Software and FCS Express. Today, we're going to be going over batch processing, and we're going to tell you about what's new in our latest release, as well as covering some of the standard features just to give you a nice, well-rounded presentation today. So just to go over a couple of ground rules here, if you do have any questions here, please feel free to use the questions box. My colleague Kaya Ghosh is here with me today, and she'll be happy to answer any of your questions. And I'll also be looking in the questions box to see if there's something that might be best answered live. So I do want you to be involved, and I want to make sure that we are giving you the information that you need to use FCS Express for your data analysis. So okay, let's go ahead and get started with some of the topics that I'll be covering today. I'll be defining what a batch process is. We have 3 steps of batch processing. I'll go over each of those steps. We'll talk about what is an iteration and how iterations are used in FCS Express. We'll be adding batch actions. We'll be talking about our batch options. We'll look at some batch processing modes. We'll run our batch processing, and then we'll review some output files and reports. So to get us started, let's talk about those 3 steps of batch processing in FCS Express. So what the 3 steps are is 1, I bring my data into the workspace or my layout. I create an analysis strategy. That's step 1. See, you have a nice little analysis strategy here in the middle. Step 2, I move into the batch processing window and I start adding actions or reports. These are the elements that I want to create as a result of my batch processing. Then third, I run or rerun or review my batch processing to make sure that I'm getting the elements out that I expected or that I want. So what batch processing really does for you in FCS Express, it allows you to analyze multiple data files without having to create multiple plots for each data file. So you get this analysis strategy, FCS Express automates and takes your data files and brings them through that analysis strategy and then creates those end results for you, whether it be a PowerPoint or Excel or even a Word report. That's the power of FCS Express is once you've done all of that work in creating this analysis strategy, the software will take over and run all of your data files through it. You have the ability to print, save, and or export your layout and statistics in multiple different formats. And we're going to look at those options when we start adding actions here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take you into a layout that I've already created. I wanted to have the analysis strategy built for you already. We're not going to be talking about creating the plots or the gating or any of those baseline things that are established before you run a batch process, but I just want to discuss a little bit about what's happening in this layout. So in this layout, I'm analyzing some drug treatments here. So I'm looking at my lymphs and my blasts and then some other populations like CD4 and CD8. So here you can see I have a density plot here. I've got some initial gates for my lymphs and blasts, as well as gating out for my CD8 and CD4. I've got a nice bar chart here looking at the differences between my percent of CD4 and CD8. I have a ratio for here for the CD4 and CD8. And then I also have a small default statistic table here related to my histogram where I'm showing both my lymphs and blasts population. On the next page, I have a image to just show you a nice way to produce like an overlay. So I've taken all of my data files here, I've stacked them into a single histogram, I've converted it to a nice 3D image, and I'm looking at my CD19 positive lymphs here. Just nice visual. Could be a really great element to just report out as a single image, and we're going to actually use that for that in just a few minutes here. Also, I have a page to do tiles. Now, tiles are really great when I'm looking across multiple samples and I want to do a comparison. I want to do a side-by-side comparison of the same plot. So for this page, I'm going to use this plot to set up a really nice tile page so we can look across all of my iterations at the difference between my lymphs and blast populations and the expression that I'm picking up with my experiment. On this last page, one of the new features that we've introduced into batch processing is the ability to now create that summary table by using batch process. So it's now going to be in an internal spreadsheet. So I don't have to create this as I go. I can create it kind of as an ending feature once I've got the analysis strategy all set up. I'll have this nice summary report. And then you can see here, I have a chart that I've already started to create. But once this spreadsheet is populated, it's going to autofill for me. So again, just having that features that the software is going to work as hard as me. So FCS Express is doing all of this for me as I'm working through my data set. I just have to give it some information on how I want to run through batch processing. So now that we've got familiar with our layout just a little bit, for those that are newer to FCS Express, I'm just going to run through each iteration here. And by default, each iteration coming into FCS Express is assigned to a single data file. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to just do one data file at a time. We have multiple places where we can access panels. So here at the bottom is one. We have a little panel tab to access it here. Also on our data tab, we have panels, and also on that batch tab. So this is really just features to organize your data. If you're looking maybe at immunophenotyping panel and you have 4 different tubes that you're using together to look at all of the different expressions, we have panels. We can implement them quite easily. We open up that panel window, do an add, create a name for our panel. I'll just do panel here, and then we can assign different numbers of tubes. Now, what this does is it changes that default behavior of assigning one iteration to one data file to now assigning one iteration to the 4 tubes. So when I click OK, it's marked active. I click OK again, you'll see my iteration number has now changed. I now have 3 iterations. The last one is incomplete, but these first 2 have the 4 data files that it's expecting. Now, one thing that's really nice about FCS Express is once you've created a panel and you decide, oh, well, maybe I don't need to use that, you don't have to delete it out. You can simply uncheck the box, click OK, and it's going to restore to that 1 data file per 1 iteration. Now, iterations are really important for batch processing. This is how we actually parse through all of your data. So if you look at my data list right now, you can see that all of my iterations are blue. For batch processing to work and to use all of your data files, this is what you want to see. So this is one of the things that I absolutely check before I start getting into doing my batch processing. Just want to make sure that all of these samples are blue. If you see that they are not, that's okay. We can fix that, right? So I'm going to actually deactivate one intentionally just so you can see what this would look like. So I'm going to drag out a data file here when I've moved to a different data file. And you'll see now that I've actually deactivated my some of these iterations. Now, this happens quite a bit with using overlays or when you're doing inserting a summary spreadsheet. So we've seen this quite a bit. If you do see it, it's okay. Go to your View tab, go to your Data Navigator, and it will help show you where things are going awry. Now, I have that overlay already here in my workspace. So I expect to see one histogram under all of these data files. I've turned all of the batch processing or moving to a new data file on that histogram. So having it is okay in this layout. But if I didn't do that, that would be another way that I could deactivate my iterations. But I can see here that I have an additional plot for this data file, but I see on my other 2 plots, I have a different sample. So I can always, whenever you're using FCS Express, you can click and it will highlight. So it's got that red boundary now. It will highlight the plot where this data file is being used, and it's kind of the unexpected thing. Then I can go ahead and fix that. So if I close that window here, I see my 44693 data file is what's supposed to be or expected to be on the plot at this time. As soon as I fix that, all of my iterations are now blue. So iterations are really the foundation of batch processing. You want to make sure that they're all blue before you start looking to develop your batch processing. Now, let's go to that batch tab. On the batch tab, We've done step one. Step one is done. We've got this great analysis strategy going here. Step two are those batch actions. So when I click on batch actions, I have this blank window at first, but you can see I have multiple elements here that I can add in, which is great, right? I have all these different features, so it's pretty much like, what is it that I want to do? You see, I've put together kind of a short list here of things that we're going to be covering today. No, in no way is that completely, going to cover all of the bases. So if there are some batch actions that you do want to discuss, please feel free to reach out to us either at support@denovosoftware.com or shoot us a question or a message here in the questions box, and we'll be sure to reach out to you after the webinar to make sure that you're getting the most out of the software here. So some of the actions that we're going to add, and we're going to go through step by step, and we're going to talk about in detail all of the options here. So we're going to start with just adding a print. And so when I click on print, I'm going to have, right now it's just kind of a default Microsoft print to PDF. If I click on properties, I'm going to be able to scroll any of the printers or copiers that I'm connected to here. So you can change that, modify that. You can change the orientation. As you can see right now, I have a landscape layout, so a portrait print is probably not going to do me well. I can change that feature as well, and then just click OK. That will update. I do have some different modes that I can use. I'm going to go with a full page here because we're not actually going to print this out. This can be super useful if you're using this as a presentation, right? I'm going to be presenting to a bunch of people. I want to have some notes in front of me, or maybe I just wanted to show somebody quickly like what I've done in FCS Express, and I want them to confirm like, yeah, that looks good. Let's keep going with this strategy before I do maybe all of my batch processing. So this is a really great tool. Also, on all of our different features that we can add here, different reports or output options, we do get to select page ranges. So this can be great because if I have an intense layout, I have 15 pages, I may not want to print all of them. Maybe the nuts and bolts of everything that I've done is just on page one. I can select a page one. Or if I'm always looking at a certain page at the end of my analysis, I can also select current page. It kind of depends on how you feel about things. I kind of like to just insert that page number because then I know for sure if somebody has moved to a different page or the wrong page, it's going to print out as expected. Of course, you do have some print options. If you're printing multiple pages, you can add some of these, one-sided, two-sided, collated, uncollated, grayscale or color. Just some options that you would normally find when you're printing anything out. And then of course we can do a couple of different things. So we can print each iteration separately, and what that means is each iteration would then be its own print command. So if something happened in between, I could probably cancel the last 7 prints, or you can just combine it into one single print task. And that will just print everything out. You can also define how many numbers of copies. And so then once I click OK, you're going to see it here added to my batch process actions. What's really great, I don't have to commit to this forever also. So once I create this, this will be saved with my layout. But if for whatever reason, like today, I'm actually not connected to my printer, I can just uncheck it. And then I can still have this batch process action here when I need it and not have to use it at any given time. So the next thing we're going to do is save a layout. So this is great because sometimes, we do all of this work, we run the batch processing and, maybe we have to run off to another experiment or do something else. Having it run and automatically save for you while you're doing the batch process just takes one less thing for you to have to worry about at the end of doing your batch processing. So with this, you're going to see here, we get to designate an output. So I'm going to click on this folder. It's going to bring me to my batch processing folder here. I'm going to just insert kind of a placeholder right now. And why I'm going to do this is because you can, of course, name the file as you'd like, but I like when I create something in FCS Express, the ability that when I create it once, I don't have to go back and recreate the wheel. And what I mean by that is I can use tokens here. And tokens are a great key because it just makes it so more automated. I didn't have to go back and change anything. I don't have my hands in any places to make an accidental error. So when I use this little token icon, I'm actually going to grab a keyword here and I'm going to do an insert. So it's going to select a plot for me. I'm going to go to my keyword here And then this is going to grab any of the keywords that are inside of my data file. We have all that metadata stored here, and you can pull it into your FCS Express analysis. It's just another tool, again, to use FCS Express and to use all of the resources or all the things available to you from a single FCS file. So I'm going to grab this experiment keyword here and click OK. Now, once you know whatever keyword you're going to be using to either create a folder or add in as a token, like you're not going to have to keep scrolling all the way down. I can now just type this in. I just wanted to confirm I've got the right one, click OK, and then I'm going to see a nice token appear here in that file folder name. I'm going to do another backslash because I actually want to create a new folder here. So there's going to be a new folder called my drug development here, and then I'm going to add one more token. Now this is a custom token. It's going to display the date of this experiment in a way that is really conducive with a folder or a file name. So I'm going to insert that here. And then the next important thing is, because I'm creating this new folder, it's important to check that little create output folder box if it doesn't exist. Because it's creating it new, it has to have the permission there. Now, with our layouts, you know, when you do an ordinary save, we have 3 different save types. We have the no link, link, embedded. So I always like to choose personally to link. I save my data layouts with the actual data files. I like to keep them in the same folder, because then even if the folder gets moved around, the pathway to my data files is not interrupted, so I don't have to go back and relook for them. No link, if you're saving it as a no link, that would be saved as like a template, and the next time you came in, you would have to reload new data. If you saved as embedded, you would actually only embed the data file that was showing on the layout at the time of the save. And here I'm going to save only at the end of the batch. I don't want it to save a bunch of different times. I just want it to save one time here at the end of batch, and I'm going to click OK. Now, the next thing I'm going to add here is going to be a save to PowerPoint. This is super useful. I actually love this feature, probably one of my favorite batch export processes here. I'm going to open the presentation after saving. I always like to look at the elements that I'm creating. I'm going to leave the quality to on screen, but you do have options here if you wanted to change it to a printing quality, high, low, medium. We're going to do a full page for this one, because we're just going to do this first page as well here. Click 1, so I'm going to enter 1 here, and I'm going to combine all of my iterations into the same presentation. You do have the same option to separate these one by one. Then you do have to be careful with naming and make sure that each iteration has a different name. You could definitely use tokens to have that file name included. For me, saving them all in the presentation works really well. Now, one of the other amazing things that we have is, if you're doing a longitudinal study and you're using this template kind of over and over, but you don't want to have 554 different PowerPoints at the end of this study, you can actually append into a single PowerPoint presentation that you've already created, which is really nice. It streamlines everything. Once you're done with your longitudinal study, you're going to have a stack of all of your different PowerPoint slides here stacked together in one place. We're just starting with this one, so we're going to save to an empty file, and then it's going to be kind of the same thing here. I get to designate where this file is going to go. I'm going to do the same kind of placeholder thing here, and then I'm going to just insert those tokens. I really like how it turns out when it creates the new folders and things for me. And then we'll just type in that keyword this time. Click OK. And then I'll bring in that date so everything looks consistent across as I'm creating these things. Now at the bottom here, again, you do have to check that little create output folder if it doesn't exist. Otherwise, you will get an error message that says, hey, you haven't created this. We might as well show you that while we're here. Click OK. It says, hey, you don't have the permission to create this file. You just click on correct. It will let you check the box now and click OK. The next thing we're going to add is that PDF. And for this PDF, we're going to do it a little differently. So this is the one that I was talking about with those tiles, or doing a side-by-side comparison with your plots. With this, to change that strategy, to make sure that I can get that tiled appearance or side-by-side comparison of a single plot, instead of choosing the full page option here, down at the bottom we have the custom grid. Once I choose that custom grid, I can also click on these ellipses here. So I have 9 files. I want my plots to be as big as possible and as neatly spaced. So I'll do a 3x3 here, and then I can change how I want spacing. So if I want bigger plots, I can change it to minimal so that they'll be as close together as possible. We have an auto default setting, and then you can manually adjust as well. For the horizontal here, the order, you can have them ordered horizontally, meaning 1, 2, 3 across in a row, or you can actually turn it to vertical so that it'd be 1, 2, 3 in the first column, 4, 5, 6 in the next, so on and so forth. I like horizontal, so I'll click OK here. And this is a specific page number, and it's going to be 3, so I'm going to enter that here. And then again, we have those same iteration options that we were talking about earlier, whether we do combined, individually. I like to choose when I do my tile work to do combine all the iterations into a single file without a page break. It just is really neat. Even if it has to move to another page, it does a really clean job of moving that data for me. And again, we're going to check these folders here, do my little placeholder, and add my tokens. And one thing I like to point out with when you grab these tokens, if you're using like a keyword or statistic token here, you do get this nice little thumbnail, so you know exactly where your keyword is coming from. Then we'll click OK here, do another backslash, and add that date. And this is a custom token. We're going to look at those in just a second here when we get to our Excel spreadsheets. We're going to open this, and then we're going to create that data file if it doesn't exist, and click OK. So we're powering through pretty well. We've got already 4 different elements here. We're going to keep going. When we get to the spreadsheets, it's going to be a little bit more because the spreadsheets, when we first introduce them, they're actually empty. So here for this picture, I'm going to add the file name first here. And what's nice is I also have all these different formats. So if I'm exporting out this image, this picture here, I'm not just stuck with one, like either a JPEG or a TIFF. I can actually choose which style I want. I'm going to go with a JPEG today. Go ahead and click Save. And then again, I'm going to just adjust those or add those tokens rather. And it seems like a little bit of work here in the front end, but once I've got these tokens set up, I don't have to go back and recreate these. I can hand this over to my colleague or someone else, and it's going to pull out and use the same naming strategy. So we're not going to have to be like, oh man, I have no idea where this thing went. They may have to reroute the folder that it goes into, but at least the naming strategy can be the same here. We'll click OK. We did JPEG. You can adjust picture quality if needed. You can use the screen resolution, or you can adjust the resolution individually. I'm actually just going to do a single plot. Remember that histogram that we saw with CD19? I'm going to select that here. It updates in my little thumbnail. So I'm like, yep, check, that's the one that I want. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK and just add that element. So now let's go ahead and add some spreadsheets. So my favorite new feature that we have in FCS Express is this internal spreadsheet. I love it. I only now have to populate a single file, and then it does all the work and it creates a nice summary spreadsheet that I can use for my charting in FCS Express. It's quite wonderful. So I've already included that spreadsheet on the spreadsheet page there, so it has selected that spreadsheet for me. We do have some options with our spreadsheet. We have this with our regular spreadsheet as well, and we'll go and see that again in just a moment here. But you can start at the first available row, which is great, right? So I want to make sure that my data is being added in the same place. But another thing that's amazing that we can do is we can actually append into this same spreadsheet. So I can create this with one file, and then, or on one day with one batch of information, I can come back, add some additional data files, batch again and append on to this data. So I can keep this spreadsheet growing, which is really great for some of our other new features like our charts, our Levy Jennings chart. That, you know, I can create now just this internal spreadsheet that's recording as I go. And it's lovely because then all of the charts are going to update as the new information comes in as well. So start at first available row is great. If you are appending for the column options, I do recommend that you do check this box to start at column A. Otherwise, it will come down and shift over. So it will start in the very first available row and the very first available column if this first one is checked. So if you're going to append, I do recommend just starting here. Also, if you did have, you know, maybe something happened before you're starting over, you can also start a whole export out at just row 1. It's really just up to you on how you format this internal spreadsheet. And then you can, of course, export each iteration into a separate row or column, just defining which way you want your data to be displayed in this spreadsheet. I like rows personally. And then if you're appending, so after the first export, if you're appending on, I would probably recommend unchecking this row and column label so that you don't have multiple places. But again, that's completely optional if you want to keep those headers there as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now I have this spreadsheet. Well, like I said, this is just an empty spreadsheet. I don't, there's nothing here for me yet. So I have to build this out just like I would build anything else. And it's really quite simple to do. I can just drag and drop. Once I've got it on to a plot here, I'm going to actually start with a keyword token. For this one, we're going to use a sample name. I actually know the keyword, but I always like to be super visual and just make sure I actually grabbed the right one. So I'm going to use this sample identifier here and click OK. So one of the things too in FCS Express that once you added something to an internal spreadsheet, you don't have to use our default column label. So if you ever have like exported out a spreadsheet and you're like, oh gosh, like what happened, that column label, I don't even know what it means. We do have the ability to format that. So we can actually change this. So sometimes for some of the keywords, you'll get like keyword before you actually get what the keyword was. And so sample ID is going to make a lot more sense than $SMNO if somebody else is looking at my work. So I'm going to go ahead and just do sample ID there and click OK. And now I can drag and drop and add a couple more statistics here. For this, I'm just going to grab my lymphs and blasts. Actually, let me cancel that. I'm going to go back one because I have a strategy already set up here. I'm going to grab this other plot and I'm going to do my CD4 and CD8. And I'm going to do number of events and percent of all cells and click OK. Now I'm going to take a moment here and add one of those custom tokens because I did touch on that just a little bit. On our view tab, we do have the option to do a bunch of different custom tokens to get those formulas and functions into the workspace. So I've already created a CD4 and CD8 ratio token. So I'm going to just drag and drop this token into that spreadsheet here. Now I actually want it to be above my percent of all cells here. So I'm going to just drag it out. So when you drag anything, you want to see this nice little blue line, and I'm going to drag it out and I'm just going to place it right after my number of events. I want it to be in this place here. So then I've got my other statistics here. I'm going to do one more drag and drop with my other plot, just grab a couple other statistics, and then we'll have this first internal spreadsheet populated. So there we go. I've clicked those in. So now I've got a couple more statistics here for this internal spreadsheet. So great, we've built that. The last thing we're going to do here is just do an external spreadsheet as well. So similar to what we saw before, here we're going to start with just defining where this spreadsheet is going to go. So I'm going to do the same folder. I'm going to add those same tokens. And then one more token here to get that date in there. And create that output folder. And then we can move to worksheet options. So very similar to what we saw for the internal spreadsheet, we now have those same kind of options again for something that we're appending to. For this one, when we're doing the external spreadsheet, we can actually add just new pages if we wanted to. If we wanted to add a new worksheet in the same spreadsheet, we can do that. We can also add on the existing spreadsheet that we do kind of similarly into the internal spreadsheet. And then you get to define those row and column options as well. So I'll just click OK here. And now you're probably thinking, oh gosh, now she has to go back and repopulate this whole thing. Well, one of the features that's really great is that I don't. I can actually just grab these here from my internal spreadsheet, right click and copy, and then paste them here. And maybe for my external spreadsheet, I don't need all of these. Maybe I don't need any of my CD4 information. Great. I can just go ahead and delete those out. And now I have a short and sweet little Excel sheet that's already built for an external export here. So again, all these actions, just as a reminder, you're not going to have to recreate these. Once I've built this once, I can just simply check or uncheck if I want to use these options or not. For my actual one of these, you're going to see I'm going to kind of split up this batch processing. There's some really great features because everything runs so fast and is so intuitive that even if you have to split like a batch process to maybe run just to get one image out and then run everything else, it goes so quick that it's really worth it. It's just such a valuable tool for the software. So what I'm going to start with here is I'm going to bring us back to our data files here. So what's important whenever you're going to run a batch process is you want to make sure that you're on the right data file, right? So for this first batch process that I'm going to run, I only want one data file or one image, one of this overlaid histogram to be produced. So I'm actually going to uncheck all of my other options here. And I'm just going to save that one picture. So here, all I'm going to do, I have everything unchecked. It's still going to be saved, so I don't have to worry about, oh gosh, now I have to go back and recreate anything. I just go to my batch options or batch tab rather, and now I can just click run. I get this little batch information window. It tells me when it's created it. Okay, it's finished. So now I can go ahead and uncheck that and now go back and create any of the other elements that I wanted to create with this workspace. Now I'm going to bring us back after we created that one element. We're going to look at some other features here. So another feature that's great is we have some batch processing options. I think for me, I usually tend to use my unconditionally pause quite a bit. I just like to see as I'm going through data files if I need to make any adjustments. The software does remember using iteration snapshots, any of the changes that we make when we use any of these pauses. So, and this is important for when we go back over some of these run modes that we have. Now, if I do an unconditionally pause between each iteration, the software is going to stop and just let me take as much time as I need as it moves through. I can move my my gates and anything that needs to be adjusted. I can make those adjustments. And like I said, the software is going to remember. That could be great if I have 9 files. If I have 95 files, that could be horrendous, right? So we can also induce some features like pause on a condition. Maybe I have a viability indicator in there and I want the software to stop anytime my viability is less than 70%. You can add a token to do that. We can also pause on flagged iterations. If I've gone through my data files and I see that on file, 47 has just been problematic all day, I can actually flag that data file. Also, again, kind of similar with the flags, if you just wanted to pause on a specific iteration, maybe that 45 was giving me a real kink in the neck, I can check this box and then pause on a specific iteration. Now, talking about using those pauses to make adjustments, if you want to see those iteration changes, any of the changes that you make, it's going to be really important to go to our Tools tab and to have this Apply Iteration Snapshot checked. So then after the batch process is done running, you can actually see all those changes as you parse through your data files. Additionally, now that we've kind of gone through those batch processing options, when we want to use the rerun or review, We also want to make sure that we have that pause feature, one of those pause features selected. So what is the difference between a run, a rerun, and a review? So a run is going to run this batch processes for the first time. It's just going to run it as is. If you have pauses and make changes, it's going to accept that, but it's just going to be like the first brand new opened my eyes to the thing. Rerun is actually after you've gone through the first time, you use those pauses and made some changes to gates and things, and now you just want to reapply that, but you need to rerun because maybe you have to, maybe something didn't come out as expected or for whatever reason. And then a review will let you see all of the changes that you made during a batch process. So it'll take you through each of those iterations, but it won't create any of our batch process actions, reports, or output elements here. So that's the difference between our run modes there. Also, while we're talking about getting ready to run this batch processing, we do have this great feature now in FCS Express where we can create virtually gated data. And what I mean by that is instead of actually having to go through the process of going to our data tab and using batch export and creating new data files that are only going to show a certain gated or certain population of interest, we can actually do that within the software without ever having to actually create that data file. So if I grab one of my data files here, I'm going to move back to that first iteration anyway, so that when we are ready to start this batch process, we'll be good to go. Just dock this window over to the side here and not like it takes so much room. Um, so if I right click on this first data file, I can select create gated data. On this window or in this new window here, I'm going to be able to create data files that only have a certain population selected. So maybe I just want to see, just my lymphs population, that's all. I'm going to click OK here. And now I have this new data file here. I'm going to actually spread out my data list. So let me just close out that batch action so we don't grab too much space here. And now when I extend out the file name, I have this new data file gated on lymphs. And this is going to be useful because I can use this just like any other data file. So if I click to this next data file, I'm now just going to see my lymphs population. You're going to see it down here. I have maybe some blasts that have creeped into my gate, or maybe my gate just isn't perfect. That those little things will happen, but I can just now see I'm only looking at this lymphs population. So I did it for one data file and you're like, oh, that's probably great, Robin, if I did it one at a time, but I've got 60 data files. You can also multi-select a set of data files and create those same data files together, create that gated data together. So I'll do lymphs here, click OK, and then you're going to see I have all of those new data files here. And again, you can just kind of parse through your data to look at the changes, look at how things are moving or how things are different between the two. So this is really great because now I don't have to take up any more space. Sometimes space is an issue. If I've got a big, large data set, I can do this right in the software, and then I can use this as my batch processing. So going back to those batch options for just a second here, oops, cancel that. Going back to those batch options just for a second here, now I've got all of this new data in my data list, and maybe I don't want to use it all. Currently, right now, it's saying automatically perform 3. The maximum possible is 3. But if I want to change the number of iterations that I can perform here, I can change that here. If I only wanted to perform this many here, I could select a number and insert that there. So I wouldn't have to just use that data file. Additionally, if I wanted to only do, my batch processing from the data file that's selected, then also, like, that's why I'm getting this number 3, is because right now I'm looking at file 16. So there's only 3 left. So that's the other way that I can adjust to make sure that I'm getting the exports that I want. So either I can tell it to just do so many iterations, or I can use this automatically and just make sure that I start at the data file that I would like to start at. So I'm going to do an unconditionally pause just so that we can take a look at it. We're going to click OK here. I'm going to come back. I'm actually just going to make the batch process here go for the first 9 data files. Yeah, we'll go for 9 here so that we have some time for questions and things at the end. So we'll click OK. Now I'm going to open up that batch actions window again. Just make sure I'm going to undock it here. I'm going to just make sure that I have all the actions that I want listed and checked. We've saved the picture already. So now I want to save the layout, export to PowerPoint, to PDF, and to my internal and external spreadsheets here. So that looks great. So my last step now is to confirm I'm on iteration 1. So yep, so if I click away, you will see this nice blue band for the first data file that is being displayed on your data on your layout. I do want to start with this data file. I'm only going to do those first 9 iterations. And so now the next thing I need to do is just click on run. So I'll click run here. And so I've actually run this because I was making sure I did a good job for you guys today. So I did some practice. And this is a message that you will see if you've already run a batch process here. It's going to ask you, hey, I have some iteration snapshots already saved. If I continue, those are going to be cleared and you're going to start over. And it's going to ask you if you want to continue. Now, if you click yes, it's going to go forward. If you click no here, then you're going to be able to maybe check off rerun or do, whatever else it is that you need to adjust here. So we're okay to just run this as is. So I'm going to go ahead and click yes. Then we have this nice little update window, right? So I did to unconditionally pause between each iteration because I just wanted you guys to have a moment to see what that would look like. So I can move my batch process window out of the way. Let's see if it'll let me grab it. There we go. And now I can move anything that I need to move. If I'm not limited to any of the changes that I make, I can change my markers, my quadrants, whatever adjustments that I need to make in between. It's going to pause until I tell it to go. So right now it's paused. That's great. I've made all of the changes that I want. If I need to flag something because I'm looking through my data and I'm like, oh gosh, I'm not sure what happened there, I can throw a flag out to just have something to reference back when I come back. In this case, I'm not going to change any of the gates, so I'm just going to click run to end. And it moves really quickly. It's going to produce all of these different elements. So it's producing 5 different things as I'm running this. We've got that PowerPoint, we have the PDF, we have an internal and external spreadsheet, and then we're also doing that save for my layout. Now I selected to open these windows and they're opening. They just open on weird pages. Sometimes they take by surprise here. So here is my first PDF here, and this is the tiled layout. And it looks like I could have made some adjustments here to make the size a little bit different, but this gives me the tiled layout of looking across each of these different plots here. So I'm looking at a different iteration across each of these. As we zoom in just a little bit, you can see the different file names here and just clicking now. So now I can do that side-by-side comparison here. And I'll click to close that window. Now I'm going to pull over the Excel sheet. So our external Excel sheet was pretty small. We created this Excel sheet here. It's going to work just like as if I created this from the start in Excel. So any of the things that I want to do or continue doing here, I can just work as if I had started in Excel here. As you can see, that sample ID label that I had changed is input here for that row label, which turned out really nice. Again, I have this, I can start moving forward. I don't have to recreate any elements here. We're going to do a save, sure. Then I'm going to drag over my PowerPoint. So this looks a lot like FCS Express. So just to know, this is our PowerPoint here. As I go through each of these, I'm going to be able to see this update with each of the different data files that I exported out. So I'll have 9 different pages here with just each of the different data files. Again, just a nice way. These graphics are very high resolution, a very nice presentation for you, and it's already created. You don't have to go back and recreate this after you've done your analysis in FCS Express. And so the last thing that was created for us is this internal spreadsheet. So I had done some work in behind the scenes here, and when I set up this spreadsheet, I already had added some conditional formatting. So when I inserted this information, it already did that for me. I didn't have to go back and create this. It was going to store any of the changes or any of the formatting that I did to the spreadsheet, Additionally, it's going to kind of use the defaults here to just introduce these axes labels. Just like on a plot, you're able to change this. So if I wanted to do my custom ratio here and maybe use that sample ID here, there we go. So now my information is all updated here. I've got this nice bar chart. All I had to do is push the run button to create this element. And I have this, here I go. I can just continue on making new charts or doing whatever it is that I need to do with this spreadsheet. Just kind of giving that additional element here for you as you work. And now, finally, I do want to come back to just open that folder, see if I can grab it open on the other side quickly. So now when I look in my folder here, I have that drug of development folder that I created. So that was the experiment name here that I was putting in as that token. As you see here, I've got this drug development folder. Inside this drug development folder, I have the exported features that I had saved. So I had done 5 things. I had saved my layout. I had created that JPEG image. I did my PDF, my PowerPoint, and my Excel sheet. And then the 6th thing was actually the internal spreadsheet. So now that we're in this folder, I can go ahead and just open up the image that I created for that stacked histogram. I'm going to pull that over for us really quickly. There we go. So we have this nice stacked histogram of my CD19 lymphs, and I can see the difference in expressions here. It looks like 2 have lost the CD19 positive cells altogether. 1 is really highly expressed, and then these guys are kind of similar all the way around. So of course, just a nice way to have this information exported out really quickly. And I had done that as a separate standoff step in my batch processing. Thank you so much for attending the presentation today. I did want to just kind of end off with our conclusion slide here to get you some resources in case you need it. If you have any questions or have any concerns or you want to do some one-on-one training, please feel free to reach out to us at support@denovosoftware.com. Additionally, if you go to our website at denovosoftware.com, we have tons of different resources available for you. We have webinars, we have videos, we have FAQ, a knowledge base in case you just want to look at some of the kind of commonly asked questions or figure out how to do some of the things in FCS Express.